I want to discuss a little bit of sensitive history. And if I go to sensitive history, well, then I must quote sources that say it rather than that I say it. This is a fascinating book, and the web pages are there. You can check it out. Facts are facts. This is a book that was written by a Jewish man. And he confronted the thinking of many of the high-placed individuals of the world. This is interesting stuff. In this book, Benjamin H. Friedman, a Jewish man, writes about the Jews and reveals an interesting history. He states that the present Jews in Palestine are not the true descendants of the Judeans, but rather descendants of the Khazars. In the letter addressed to D. David Goldstein of Boston, Massachusetts, a convert to Catholicism, the author, Benjamin Friedman of New York City, dated October 1954, provides some fascinating insights. This is in the public domain. Let's study this for a while and see where we get. Benjamin H. Friedman claims that the word Jew was only introduced into the English language in the 18th century, and that Jesus referred to himself as a Judean and not as a Jew. Inscribed upon the cross when Jesus was crucified were the Latin words Iesus Nazarenus Rex Iodeorum, which means Jesus of Nazareth, ruler of the Judeans. Now this is fascinating. I went and checked it, and it is so. Yes, it happens to be so. Now the word Jew today has a religious as well as a political connotation. You think of a Jewish entity, a government, but you also think of their religion incorporated at the same time, whereas the term Judean is a geographic connotation. It's a geographic. It doesn't incorporate the religion. It's where he came from. He was from Judah. He was a Judean. He further writes, the form of religious worship known as Pharisaism in Judea in the time of Jesus was a religious practice based exclusively upon the Talmud. The Talmud in the time of Jesus was the Magna Carta, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, all rolled into one, of those who practiced Pharisaism. The Talmud today occupies the same relative position with respect to those who profess Judaism. So the rituals and rites that many of them observed were based on the Talmud and not on the Torah. Rabbi Morris, this is all from the source. Rabbi Morris in Kurtzer wrote a most revealing and comprehensive article with the title, What is a Jew?, which was published as a feature article in Look magazine in June 17, 1952 issue. In that article, Rabbi Morris Kurtzer evaluated the significance of the Talmud to Judaism today.
In Brazil, we have a proverb that says, the eyes that have seen the ocean. You see, these eyes can't be satisfied by seeing a mere river, right? So it's all about perspective. If you're used to seeing something big, you see something small, it won't move you. But if something small is what you're used to seeing, maybe a stream, when you see a river, you'll be so much excited. So it's a proverb about perspectivism. And this perspectivism is something which is shaped by experience. It's also shaped by the language that you speak. When a people have seen the wide ocean of truth, they cannot accept only the narrow river of stories given by power. History is the ocean. Politics often gives us the river. The task of critical analysis is to move beyond the river and find the ocean. So this video is about the origin of present-day Jews in Palestine. We are also going to examine the coming of European Jews who are not the direct descendants of the ancient Judeans, and compare these stories with the lived experiences of Black Americans in the United States of America. we are also going to connect the story with modern Israel, biblical memory, and black history. You see, this is not only a story about Jews and Palestinians. It is also about displacement, power, identity, and the way history is retold to justify present oppression. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this video. Watch it. I shall give you my thoughts by the end of the video, where we shall also have a deep, critical analysis. Let's dive in.
In that illuminating treatise and that important subject, by the most qualified authority at the time, Rabbi Morris N. Kurtzer, stated, the Talmud consists of 63 books of legal, ethical, and historical writings of the ancient rabbis. It was edited 5 centuries after the birth of Jesus. It is a compendium of law and lore. It is the legal code which forms the basis of the Jewish religious law, and it is, note, the textbook used in the training of rabbis. So rabbis are trained according to the Talmud, and the Talmud has very little in common with the Bible. Then he states, from the birth of Jesus until this day, there have never been recorded more vicious and vile, libelous blasphemies of Jesus or Christians and the Christian faith by anyone, anywhere, or any time than you will find between the covers of the infamous 63 books, which are the legal code which forms the basis of the Jewish religious law, as well as the textbook used in the training of rabbis. I don't want to go into it. If I were to put the quotes on the screen, which the Talmud contains about Jesus, you would be horrified. It is some of the vilest statements that I have ever had the dishonor of reading. And this is what their training consists of. He then proceeds to quote some of the most horrendous statements from the Talmud regarding ethical issues, and not only regarding ethical issues, which deal with many, many issues from economics to relations with women, etc., and of course, the view on Christ. As to the origin of the present Jews in Palestine, he states that those Jews derived from Eastern Europe, and many, many of the Jews that today live in the reconstituted state of Israel come from Eastern Europe, are not descendants of the Judeans or the lost tribes of Israel, but rather descendants of the Khazars. Who were they? They were a nation most people do not even know of. He writes, the so-called self-styled Jews in Eastern Europe in modern history cannot legitimately point to a single ancient ancestor who ever set even a foot on the soil of Palestine in the era of Bible history. Research also revealed that the so-called or self-styled Jews in Eastern Europe were never Semites, are not Semites now, nor can they ever be regarded as Semites at any future time by any stretch of the imagination. What secret, mysterious power has been able for countless generations to keep the origin and the history of the Khazars and the Khazar kingdom out of the history textbooks? Did you ever learn about it at school? I never learned about it. And out of classroom courses in history throughout the world, the origin and the history of Khazars and the Khazar kingdom are certainly incontestable historical facts. You have to do some cross-checking. Even the Jewish Encyclopedia is quite explicit about it. This was the Khazar kingdom. Here is the Black Sea, the Byzantine Empire. Here was Persia. And here was the kingdom of the Khazars. It was a massive kingdom. Now let's look at some of this interesting history. The Khazars were an Asiatic nation. And the Jewish Encyclopedia states Persian origin that converted to Talmudic Judaism. Now obviously some of the rabbis involved there could have been Judeans and probably were Judean descendants, but their converts are not Judeans. And that had conquered a vast area of Eastern Europe, which was in turn later conquered by the Russians in the 10th and 13th century. So that is why there are so many Russian Jews. Have you ever thought where they came from? Did they escape from Palestine? Were they the lost 10 tribes? Did they emigrate to Russia? No. This is a totally different nation that accepted Talmudic Judaism. He writes, after a historic session with representatives of the three monotheistic religions, King Bulan, 7th century, decided against Christian and Islam, because Islam had just arisen, and selected as the future state religion the religious worship then known as Talmudism, and not known and practiced as Judaism, which was totally different, which was based on the Bible. They adopted the Hebrew alphabet, and the Khazars adapted words to their requirements from the German, the Slavonic, and the Baltic languages. This language was known as Yiddish. And Yiddish used the Hebrew alphabetic characters, but not Hebrew. It's not Hebrew. It's Yiddish. I've always wondered, when I hear them speaking Yiddish, I understand quite a few words. Why? Because I'm German. They had many exchanges with universities and their students were trained. So here is another nation which had occupied this area, and they had adopted this religion and brought rabbis in and trained the people, but they were not Judean. Now let's jump to today. In accordance to this history, the religion of the modern state of Israel is based on Kabbalistic and Talmudic traditions and is far removed from the biblical worship of Yahweh. And if it is based on the Talmud, it is so anti-Jesus Christ that it belies understanding. And here we have, in March 2006, while visiting Yeshiva University at Brooklyn, New York, a Jewish institute dedicated to the study of the what? Talmud. We have Cardinal Kasper. Who's Cardinal Kasper? Cardinal Kasper is the cardinal associated with ecumenism. They are honoring the Talmud together. You see, behind the scenes, there is a pact. Because I, as a Christian, can sympathize with every other religion, but I cannot embrace a religion that speaks evil of Jesus Christ. Nor can I have a union with such a religion. Because can two walk together lest they be agreed? Now let's get back to the Napoleonic society and see what happened further. Napoleon established both the Bank of France, we saw that, the French Bourse, the stock exchange, as well as the National Department of Tax Boards. Do we have all of those systems of governments in the world today, yes or no? Yes, we do. And we have the same system of economics today, yes or no? Yes. The world is run by the stock exchange. To ensure equitable taxation for all, consequently the income of the French peasants skyrocketed. Think tanks and research centers were established in France to work on projects vital for national economy. So a totally new economic order evolved. Who started these organizations? We will have to see. Who runs the secret societies today and the secret organizations? Who started them? Who is the instigator? Who's the boss behind the scenes? We will have to see. And maybe we'll get a different picture of what's happening in the world. An industrial board was organized to provide data and information to French industry, as exemplified by the success of the sugar beet farming and the canning industry. In the military, Napoleon pioneered in what we describe today as the principles of war. And did you know that these principles, the armies of today, are based on the organization created by Napoleon for his Grand Army, and it has been used ever since. Who controls these armies?
We are going to study the ancient Judeans and their biblical foundation. You see, this story begins in the ancient land of Judea. Thousands of years ago, the Judeans were a Semitic people who lived in the narrow land called Israel and Palestine. Their identity was tied to the land, the temple, and the covenant with a God called Yahweh, the Most High God, the only true God. Biblical texts record exile, slavery, and return. Yet, even the Bible, exile was never total. Some Judeans remained in the land through Babylonian conquest, Persian rule, Greek Empire, and Roman occupations. This means there was always a local population with deep roots. Right? So why is this narrative used so strongly in modern times, right? Why is this narrative of some black people are Jews, the Jews we know today are not the real ones? Why is it so popular in these modern times? This is because history becomes a weaponized memory. For black people, the Bible became a story of both bondage and freedom, but also a tool used by slaveholders to control. In the same way, the story of Judea has been used both as a cry for survival and as a justification for power over others, right? So let's try and look at the dispersion and the birth of European Jews. After the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, and later the Bar Kokhba revolt in 135 CE, many Judeans were dispersed. But here is the critical point. Not all Jews left. Many converted under Roman and later Islamic rule. Others became Christians or Muslims. The local Palestinian population today carries some of this ancient Judean blood. Meanwhile, in Europe, something else happened. Through centuries, Judaism spread not only by birth, but also by conversion. Historical research, most famously by a man, a scholar by the name Arthur Koestler, right? In the book called The 13th Tribe. He argues that many Jews of Eastern Europe descent, many Jews of the Eastern Europe descent came from what we call the Khazars, a Turkic people who converted to Judaism in the early Middle Ages. This is controversial, of course, but it shows us the complexity of identity. So the Jews of Poland and Germany, who later migrated into Palestine in 19th century and 20th centuries, were not simply the direct bloodline of ancient Judeans. They were Europeans carrying a different cultural and genetic history, right? But who benefits? Who benefits telling the story that they are the direct descendants? Who benefits by telling this? Because it is a lie that is being pushed, right? So to answer this, we must understand that the modern state of Israel, which claims legitimacy from biblical connection, that is a probable answer. Probable, kindly take note of that, probable, right? So we have what we call Zionism and the European return to Palestine. This is a topic that I believe touches on this issue. You see, in the late 1800s, European Jews facing persecution in Russia and discrimination in Europe began to organize under the banner of Zionism. Zionism was not only a spiritual return, it was a political movement shaped by European nationalism. You see, when they arrived in Palestine, they conquered local Arabs, Muslims, and Christians who lived there for centuries. Yet, the Zionist narrative presented the land as empty, waiting for the return of its ancient people. Here we see the river versus the ocean again. The river says, a people without a land for a land without a people, right? A people without a land for a land without a people. It's like I go somewhere, I find people living there, and they claim this is my old home. I chase them away and say, when asked why I'm chasing them away, I'm saying, no, this land is empty. It has always been our ancestors. Now we just came back and kindly move out, right? Basically, that's what is going on here, right? So here we see the river and the ocean narrative again, right? For black people, this echoes the myth of America as an empty land given by God for settlers. Indigenous people were erased in the story, just as Palestinians were erased. Both myths were used to justify conquest, right? So another thing we want us to look at is modern Israel and the politics of memory. In 1948, Israel was founded. For Jews, it was a refuge after the Holocaust, a place of survival. For Palestinians, it was what we call Nakba, which is called the catastrophe, the mass displacement of their people. Here the contradiction becomes sharp. A people who suffered slavery, exile, pogroms, and genocides came to the land and displaced another people. This is where deconstruction, or rather my critical analysis, forces us to sit with paradox. How can the oppressed also become the oppressors? For black Americans, this is relatable. The US was built on the backs of slaves, yet after slavery, blacks faced Jim Crow laws, mass incarceration, and systemic racism. They are citizens of the US, but are often treated as strangers in their own homeland. Palestinians too, in their homeland, are treated as strangers, their rights being denied, right? You see, history repeats itself when its lessons are not learned. In the Bible, exiles and return are themes, right? But what if the lesson is not about returning to land, but about returning to justice? What if the word return has been equivocated, rather, has been given another meaning, which is not contextual, but metaphorical, right? So black history teaches us survival through memory, songs, sermons, and stories which carried the truth of slavery and freedom. In the same way, Palestinian memory holds on to olive trees, villages, and keys to houses left in 1948. So my critical analysis asks this question: what is erased? What is remembered? Black Americans were told their history began with slavery, erasing African civilization. Palestinians are told they are recent arrivals, erasing centuries of rooted life. Both are lies that serve power, right? So that was more in the past. Let's move into the present. What's the present situation? You see, today, Jews in Israel live with power backed by military forces. Palestinians live under occupation, checkpoints, and siege. Black Americans live with systemic racism, mass incarceration, and economic inequality. You see, these have a lot of similarity, and the categories align to one another. The first one is displacement and slavery, African slavery and Palestinian exile, right? The second is erasure of history. You are nothing without slavery. You never existed before 1948. So this is between black people and the Israelis. Another one is identity weaponized. Bible used to justify slavery, right? Bible used to justify Zionism, that is weaponized identity. Another thing we have, or rather the fourth category, is resistance, civil rights, black power, right? Which is also an intifada and a global solidarity, right? So the professors, or rather the scholars' insight is that the history that is happening is very predictive. It shows the cycles, and those who forget justice, those who forget justice commit injustice. That is what they do, because they don't know what justice is, right? So the aim of this critical analysis and my deconstruction is to uncover the hidden power in stories. When we deconstruct the story of the modern Jews in Palestine, we do not deny Jewish suffering or history, but rather we ask one question: why must Jewish safety be built on Palestinian suffering? When we deconstruct American history, we do not deny the Constitution or freedom. We ask, why must Black Americans still fight for rights promised centuries ago? Hope lies in truth-telling. Black theologians, people who study God, once said, people who study God, theologians, they once said this: God is on the side of the oppressed. If that is true, then truth is stranger than weapons. To end all this discussion, remember my Brazilian proverb: the ocean, if you are used to see it, and you see a river, you won't be satisfied by the river. The river is the story told by power, simple, narrow, and convenient. To them, the ocean is the full truth, wide, deep, painful, and healing. Present-day Jews in Palestine include many who are European by origin, not direct descendants of Judeans. Yet their story is tied into survival. Palestinians are direct descendants of the land, yet erased from the story. Black Americans lived in a land built by their labor, yet denied full belonging. You see? This critical analysis helps us to see these parallels. It reminds us that history is never just the past. It is the weapon of the present. And unless justice flows like the ocean, the river of oppression will continue to poison people. Yeah. So guys, you may have more thoughts, you may have an idea. I would want you to please come up front, share your ideas. We would love to see what you have to say. Yes, this is EFK Original Documentaries. You like what I do, subscribe. I'll surely appreciate, and see you in the next one.